Hello, welcome back. Recently replaced the radial fan in this inverter, and the job itself was pretty straightforward and easy. I just wanted to throw a couple tips out there for anybody that's got an IG PLUS model that this might help. It turns out though that the parts weren't that readily available. I'm kind of used to working on air conditioners or a furnace or maybe a Kenmore appliance or something, and it's pretty easy to go online and find parts. With this one, not so much. So since the job's already done, it's not going to be a detailed step-by-step procedure. I don't think that that's necessary. It's probably a waste of time. I just want to throw out a few tips. This model has two fans. This front box fan, it just circulates air around inside over the inductors. Not sure exactly what it does, other than maybe push hot air out against the aluminum case. The fan that was replaced was the main radial fan. It's back here behind this bracket. It consists of three pieces, which you will see later. I'll put the part numbers down in the description below. Inside you can see there's several connectors. Obviously you'd want to take a picture of everything before you start, and this unit is on, so I'm not going to stick my hands in it. There's high voltage in there, which kind of frightens me, to be honest with you. There's not much room at the top to get these connectors off. So the first thing you want to do is isolate this electrically. This is the DC disconnect. You want to turn that off, and obviously turn the AC off either at the breaker, at your panel, or in some cases you may have an AC disconnect, which is required by code. And these large capacitors will be charged, so you definitely want to wait 5 minutes or so before you start working on this to make sure everything's completely discharged. I tested it electrically after a couple minutes of turning it off, and there actually was about 10 volts left on the DC terminals down here, and the capacitors were still in the process of discharging. So again, take a picture of everything before you start. There's plenty of room. Grab these cables, pull the connectors off the circuit board. It's a little tight at the top, so what you want to do is remove these two screws from this bracket. Remove the top screw from this bracket. Loosen that one about 2 or 3 turns. This bracket has a slot, actually, not a hole. So leave this one in place. The bracket will droop down on this side and give you a little bit of extra space up top, and then you should be able to pull all of these cables off. And if you slide the bracket straight up, it should come right off this screw, the bottom screw on the right hand side, and that gives you access to the top screw and the bottom screw of this fan that's got a black rubber boot on it. Rubber boot presses up against the heat sink for the main power FETs to keep them cool. It was starting to get noisy, so I thought I should replace it. Since the fan was in fact working, it was just starting to get noisy, and it's winter time. I figured it's a perfect time to change it. Didn't want to get caught in the summertime with a bad fan and then have the unit overheat for something silly like that. These are 3mm inside diameter by 8mm outside diameter by 4mm thick. And as you can see on the bag, they came from Fast Eddy bearings, and in fact they are very fast. Got them in a couple of days. And as you can probably see, when it's assembled, this rubber boot covers up the part number on the fan, which is actually just kind of a generic Delta Electronics fan, but I couldn't see that, and I didn't want to tear it apart without having the part available to put it all back together immediately. So I searched around and I found a great company in Northern California, Norcal Repair. They go under FroniusInverterRepair.com. Super easy to deal with. Purchased a new fan assembly, again consisting of these 3 parts. As it turns out, this fan is actually readily available. It's a BFB 1012M, and it's kind of hard to see. There's a dash T7QE. I believe that probably has something to do with a custom nature. This is a Molex 3.0 MicroFit connector. The generic fan, the 3-wire fan, the blue wires for the tachometer, by the way. This fan is available as a dash AF00, but it doesn't have a connector, so you'd have to either get the connector or splice the wires. As I said, I purchased the whole assembly because at the time I couldn't see this part number for the fan. It's pretty easy to change the bearings. There's one bearing inside this half. This splits. And if you're careful, these clips shouldn't break. Just put a screwdriver under it and lift it a little bit. Separate these two halves. As I mentioned before, the one bearing is under the cover here in this half once you take the retainer off the shaft. And you separate the two halves of the fan housing. Then the rotor will come right off. It's got a permanent magnet inside, and the motor coils are permanently affixed to the other half. And then the other bearing is on the shaft, and there's a spring under it, which keeps the rotor centered, and it keeps the shaft retainer pulled up against the bearing on the other side. And there's a small retainer, and when I say small, I mean small. I struggled with it not to lose it. It seems to be fairly resilient. I was able to open it up enough to get it off the shaft without breaking it, and I stuck it in a magnetic holder so it wouldn't get lost. And after the bearings were replaced and everything was cleaned up inside, I was able to put it back over the shaft and squeeze it down enough that it will not fall off. So this repair should hold up, hopefully for another 10 years. And this is the whole assembly all put back together and ready to be reinstalled. But you can see my difficulty. You can't see the label on the Delta Electronics fan, so I had no idea if it was repairable or if it was a proprietary product or just what it was. So I went ahead and purchased the Fronius part number. Since I don't need this now, I'm going to go ahead and post it on eBay for sale.